Good evening. I'd like to call the regular board meeting of December 19th, 2017 to order. I would like to have clerk do the roll call first, please. I guess somehow that got reversed on this. I don't know. Pledge allegiance first.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Boy, it just goes to show you when you get dependent on
Now we can do
technology.
roll
Now
call.
we can do roll call. Okay. Mr. Clerk, roll call, please.
Andrea Voorhees.
Present.
Mike Paul.
Here.
Scott Ruggles.
Here.
Mr. Roman.
Here.
Mr. Lilly's here. Mr. Cowell.
Here.
And Liz Smith.
Delayed, I believe. Item number 4, looking for the approval of the agenda. A motion?
Mr. Supervisor, I'd like to add one item that you have in front of you. One of those are budget amendments, year-end budget amendments that need to be done at this meeting. Also, all of you up in the upper corner of your desks there, you should have 3 FYIs that are not going to be on the agenda, but just to refresh you, the MTA meeting, chapter meeting is January 25th. There's some citizen correspondence in there, and also a reminder of the meeting dates for 2018. If there are no other additions or corrections, I make a motion to approve the agenda with the addition of the 2 additional budget amendments to go along with item 6D.
Very good. Motion, looking for support?
Support.
Motion, support, all in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Agenda is approved. Item number 5 is a public comment. It's for any items that are not on the agenda tonight. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. You'll need to identify yourself and state your name and your address. Does anyone in the audience care to speak?
They won't. I will. Oh, don't worry about it, Rick. I'm not going to run you down too bad. Thomas Johnson, 9136 Buckingham. I don't need that, Mike. What the heck?
We do actually for the online group.
You what now?
We do need the mic for the online audience.
Oh, you mean my voice won't carry back there to yours? Shame on you. You need a directional mic. Okay, is that any better for you?
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. Over this past year, we have agreed to disagree many times on many different subjects. There have been a lot of talk on a lot of them very serious. We will probably agree to disagree on many more. But I have to admit, sometimes you win, sometimes I win. And with this, I want to go ahead and thank the board for what they are doing, even though I'm not happy all the time, but I don't expect to be. With that in mind, I also look at retail businesses and stores closing. And I know you are also looking at it, because if they start closing, that's going to affect our bottom line tax-wise. And I know I've spoken to some of you individually for a short period of time, and I've gotten some pretty good positive remarks coming back. With all that, I want to say Merry Christmas to everybody on the board and your families. And along with that, we will keep agreeing to disagree. I'm going to say Happy New Year. I'm looking forward to see what we can agree and disagree on. Thank you.
Merry Christmas, Tom.
Merry Christmas time. Thank you. Any other public comment? Going once, going twice. Public comment is now closed. Move on to item 6, consent agenda. Mr. Clerk.
If there's no other comments, or with comments, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda with the addition of the 2 additional budget amendments as I had requested.
All right, I have a motion, looking for support.
Support.
Motion, support, all in favor?
Aye.
Consent agenda passes. Item 7, the minutes. From approval of minutes of the special board meeting of November 21st, 2017. Any comments or corrections by the board? Mr. Powell.
I read the comments of the public and of the board, and I just have to say kudos to Amy to put a document like this together as completely as she did.
Very challenging.
I just really appreciate you, Amy. Thank you.
Good job. Okay. Very good. Any other comments from any of the board members?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from November 21st, 2017.
Make a motion from Mr. Ruggles, looking for support.
Support.
I have support from Andrea, motion support, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it.
Rick, and I always like to
Yes, sir.
say, on behalf of Amy and the job that she does for us, that really she does a great job, and I know we have to do some corrections on occasionally, but generally speaking, she's does an excellent job, so mention that.
Very good. Now she'll want a raise.
She got one.
Okay, thank you again, Amy, so much. I know that was a challenging meeting.
That was a big
with
one.
all the different speakers, it really was, okay. Moving on to item 8, resolution number 17-044, poverty guidelines for 2018. Mr. Clerk.
Janine couldn't be here tonight, and just to mention that from her conversation today, that these guidelines are basically set by the state every year. And in her opinion, that she felt that these were justified and needed to be passed this evening.
Okay, so the adoption of the resolution will be in
So I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 17-0044.
I have a motion to approve resolution 17-044. Looking for support?
Support.
I have support. Call discussion?
I just wanted to point out maybe to everyone in the audience and that this guideline, and anyone would understand why this would be the poverty level. Size of a family of one person in the family under $12,000 is considered poverty, and family of two, so my wife and I, just $16,000 is the poverty level. So that's, I would be in major favor of approving this to allow for some tax relief.
A tax relief and some qualifications for the
Yes.
various programs that are
Right.
available, so. Okay, so we have motion, we have support, all in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Item 9A, this will be under new business request from the library for wage increase. I know Mr. Lilly had requested this be put on the agenda. Do you want to comment or?
I'm sorry, Rick, I'm
Oh, I'm sorry, okay, if you have a comment that you want to, anything you want to say regarding 9A, please?
Yep, a couple comments. Number one, I want to report to the board again this month, the deficiency of $315,278.64.
What was the total again? I'm sorry, 315?
$315,278.64. I received last week a copy of a request from the library to basically authorize us to give Denise an increase in salary and also to provide retro pay. I have had several people during the month, and one of our board members have asked what my authority is as far as approving or disapproving expenditures. And I said, quite frankly, personally, I don't have any. My authority comes from the board or statutory responsibilities. We have evidently assumed this responsibility for several months now. And quite frankly, I was really taken back that part of the discussion from the library side is that we're currently already borrowing money for the township, and now we're going to add to our responsibility to pay these until such time as an agreement can be made of whatever. So my purpose in bringing this to the board tonight is to basically say that, in my opinion, this is on hold, waiting for the board to make a decision moving forward, whether we're going to continue paying the obligations of the library until such time as repayment can be made. I've got to say from the very beginning, and this goes back a lot of years, that the discussion has always been that whenever the township looked at property, there was sufficient property for the library as part of our complex. I'm disappointed that We're looking at a library separate from the township hall, but that decision somewhat has been made. I would have preferred overall to see the library be built. However, the opportunity in the future for the township hall and the senior center to be added to the complex in order to provide the library with what they need currently, and also the opportunity for the township board to consider what their needs are in the future and to plan accordingly. So that is my opinion, and I believe that it's the responsibility of the library board that made that decision to purchase the property, hampered the ability to operate their funds, and disappointed that we have in the past gave them the authority to operate on their own, and now we're financing their obligations. I'm worried also about in the future when it comes to the point that the library is built, the obligations of the library to maintain the expenses that are going to be also associated with the new library. So I want that to answer the general public of what my authority is, as well as to say to my township board that we need some authority if we're going to continue of financing until such time as an agreement that's acceptable to the board can be formalized and adopted. So I'm quite surprised that we want to keep these increases keep coming when there's already obligations there. So in a nutshell, that's where I'm at today.
Okay. Board members with comment or question? Ms.
Go ahead,
Smith?
Mr. Powell.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Mr. Powell.
All right, thank you. I certainly want to make sure that the public knows that this township board and the township general tax dollars don't have any responsibility to maintain paying the township library to stay open. I believe it's only under the openness of the administration that fees have been being paid, or the staff fees are being paid to keep the library open. Otherwise, their staff would have had been working for free over the last 4 or 5 months. In my research on this item, I obtained the minutes of the regular board meeting of the White Lake Township Board of Trustees dated February 27th of this year. And besides some items that I don't really understand under roll call, under their minutes, they have eight people that answered the yes to the, or are on the roll call. 7 were there that night. And then I kept seeing down the agenda that only 4 yeses granted approval to all of these, when 7 members were supposedly there on the roll call. If you point out, like every municipal board, you have the roll call for those that are actually on the board, and then those also present are listed as well. So it's a little confusing to those that just grab the minutes and see that the roll call is for 8 people. 7 people voted that they were there, and then only 4 members voted all the way down the rest of the agenda. I was confused about it, and I did call Mr. Rosso, and I don't see. I thought I saw him coming in. Oh yeah, there he is. And he explained to me that that really there were only 6 members of the board. That Larry and Denise are not members of the board, so they're not voting members of the board, and that he, as president, doesn't vote either unless there's a tie. And it's just unusual, and I'm not used to that. So once he explained that to me, it explained why 4 yeses carried the motion with no nays at all further down the line. And then they go into executive session at the end of the meeting, and I'm not I'm not convinced that you're allowed to negotiate for nominees under executive session. You actually have to come out and do some public work. But then 4 people voted to grant a promotion to Denise for co-chair on the White Lake Township Board, the White Lake Township Library Board. I am as concerned as Terry that we have been lending the township library money in order to stay open, and then they, on top of that, without making a budget amendment for operating, they then add $10,000 to their operating budget and expect the township here then to just ante up and pay that. And I'm quite concerned about us doing that, and then a memo from Denise to Dawn stating that not only is she asking for a future increase in pay, but then and issue a check for retro wage between her old wage and her new wage, and she doesn't identify how many months that was to be. And so that's, in my opinion, probably an inappropriate request from a township that is loaning the library money to stay open, and they want now more money to do that. And so those are my concerns. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board?
Yeah, those are some of my concerns, sir, too, Mike, was that, regardless of the fact that we're loaning them money, it just was an inappropriate time for this to happen. If they were truly autonomous, I'd be okay with it, but yeah, I agree. It's just, to me, it's just not the appropriate time to do that.
Right, I agree.
I have a question.
Mr. Earls?
What's the amount of money? I haven't seen that. Do we know how much retro pay or?
Mr. Joseph Fennell is here. He would like to address that.
Yeah, I don't know the amount right off the top of my head, but it's a nominal amount, especially for the time period we talked about having payments in years.
I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $7,000 to $8,000 a year.
Increase.
That's the increase?
When's the last time she had an increase?
Go ahead, Mr. Roman.
All right. First of all, I know Denise Stefanik has added responsibilities since our library director, Larry Ostrowski, has fallen ill. And wanted to just take a moment to offer the Ostrowski family my prayers for Larry's recovery. Denise is a CPA, certified public accountant. She holds 2 master's degrees, a master's in business administration and a master's of library and information science. And I know she's putting in extra hours to take care of the library without Larry there. And then on top of that, she's got the new building to deal with. And as we all know, our board has no authority over the library's pay rates or the personnel. We've stated it at many board meetings. The library is a separate legal entity with a separate elected board. As far as the pay raise itself, I think in relation to the monthly operating expenses, it's totally immaterial. In hindsight, guys, the library bond should have probably included a draw feature, and since that did not occur, the library spent operating funds on costs related to their new building. And I'm not trying to justify that, but the result was that the library was looking at closing its doors for the later part of 2017. Had several discussions with our bonding attorney, and his message was very clear. His message was that the 2 boards need to start working together as opposed to fighting each other. One way, and probably the simplest way to take the place of the draw feature was to have the township pay for the portion of library operating costs that we've always done for years, but instead of getting reimbursed on a monthly basis, we could have the library begin repaying once their millage revenue kicked in again, which is really mid-December, right about now. In the minutes of the November 21st, 2017 Township Board meeting, I'm quoted as follows. I stated, in regard to their operating costs, referring to the library, they do plan to continue making payments in January as the millage money comes in. And I also believe the library plans on reimbursing the township for any balance still due when the first shovel goes into the dirt. So I'm only one board member, but my recommendation would be to move forward with the game plan that's taking place, or a similar plan that this board would feel is acceptable. But again, our bonding attorney has made it clear we've got to work together with the library, stop the pointing of fingers and work with them. So that's all I had, Mr. Supervisor.
Okay, very good. Mr. Fennell, I have a question to ask you. What is the status of a reimbursement program? Please.
Well, we've been in discussions with Mr. Roman and Mr. Lilly, and we have agreed with them that we would start repaying those bills that are in arrears in January, and would continue making payments. And then when the bonds are sold, anything that was still in arrears would get caught up at that point. And they seem to be agreeable to that. And if, if nobody's come to the library board meetings and explained that they had an issue with that, and talked to the entire library board about it to see that there was an issue. So it's been our understanding that that's been satisfactory.
Well, the issue we have here is there's a lot of history with the township being used as a pass-through. I will use that term for a funding mechanism, temporary funding. In other words, my understanding that since anyone can remember, and long before this board and previous boards, that the township has done this action, has provided a payroll service, and has done the tabulation and make sure the payroll gets done, and then
Right.
also coordinates the benefits for the employees, and then the library reimburses. It's just a little distressing that things have kind of worked out the way that they have, and the fact that this has gone into the fact that the library has run into its difficulty. Mr. Roman brings light of the possibility of a draw should have been done with a bond issue,
Right.
or other things mechanisms could have been in place. It would have been a lot less controversial and stressful had that been done. But knowing that you indeed do have a plan to reimburse the township,
Right.
okay, and that will start
In January.
in January.
Right.
Okay. So,
Yeah, as a reminder, we tried starting discussions on this back in May of this year. And first time I had ever participated in anything like this, so I was not aware of all the process and protocols, and sought the help of the township to advise me as to what that might be, seeing as how the township really is the issuer of the bonds.
okay.
So,
Can you lock down a day on when you're gonna start payment back in January?
yes, right after our January board meeting. That's when the library board approves the payments for the month of January.
Okay. All right.
Can I ask a
Yes, go right ahead.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Liz. Did you did have your hand up?
I do have some comments.
You
but-
had your hand up earlier.
So in January, the library board will be able to pay their staff again, plus pay the arrears of the township fund?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I have to look at that. The plan was we would just start paying the oldest payments first and then catch up. And then, so we would just pay, I think it was the July payment we withheld at first. So we would make the July payment in January, February, the August payment in February, and so on, until the bonds are sold.
So
and it would catch
you'd
it
be
up.
kind of sliding the amount due forward, paying the end ones, but not necessarily catching up to the staff and what you owe the township.
Not the current bill, right.
But you wouldn't be going any further behind. You'd
Don't anticipate it, because right now, the way the bond selling process is going, it looks like it shouldn't go beyond 6 months. That's 6 more months anyhow.
Yes, Ms. Smith.
Okay, thank you. Well, I first want to just start out that Mr. Lilly put this on the agenda, and it's misworded from the get-go. It's a request from the library for wage increase. The library did not request anything from this board. The library requested a housekeeping, well, Denise requested a housekeeping issue from the payroll to just, she was promoted. It's not a raise, as it's been indicated. So she just asked to be paid appropriately, that the library board voted upon this, and this should be nothing more than a housekeeping issue internally. This also could have been resolved with Mr. Lilly and the library board if he had chose to communicate with them or myself. So first of all, I don't believe this should be on our agenda. I would hope that this board had learned their lesson that we are not in charge of an autonomous, separate elected board. So it's unfortunate that they're mixing the obligations of the bonds and the repayment with a promotion of an employee, that those two things are separate. Also, again, we shouldn't be micromanaging their minutes. We shouldn't be, if we have questions, sure, but we shouldn't be micromanaging another elected board's minutes. Also, it's just not appropriate for our board to decide this of the other board and mix the two issues. So there is a plan in place. I have spoke with Mr. Roman, and both treasurers and myself are communicating. There is a plan in place. It's temporary. They do plan to repay. So our board shouldn't be deciding a promotion of the library's employee. So I just want to clarify that.
I don't take it as a, in my mind's eye, that it's a request for us to approve or not approve a promotion. What I see it as is it's for more funds to be forwarded. And myself, I think that the extra mile has been gone and lapped around the park twice. And I would think that at this point in time that it would probably be in the best interest of all if consideration would be given to just stay the course until we get through this, until some payment schedule, repayments have been made, and until the township is made whole. I would not affect this increase, allow this increase in funds to be dispersed from our funding.
So Mr. Cole, I wasn't quite finished yet. So in speaking with Denise, she was requesting that this agenda item be removed because she is willing to wait for her retroactive payment until January and payments begin back to this. So she is willing to wait. This didn't need to be on the agenda with some communication. And I spoke to Mr. Roman about that, and everybody is on board with the current plan for repayment. So that is an option, is we can just wait.
Mr. Powell, you're nodding your head.
I am, simply because it's always interesting how an increase in funds from the township is not a raise. It's just a promotion, but it's still money out of our pocket into somebody else's. And so I appreciate that. It would have been really nice if we had something in writing from Denise that said, I will withhold, because my next question to Joe was going to be, is there any possibility of that happening, or the library funding her promotion instead of the township funding her promotion? And so that would be certainly an option, because we don't care. quite frankly. We care about is the money, the checks we're writing for the library. That's what I'm more concerned about, not if somebody, they could triple everybody's wage if they want to. And quite frankly, I don't have anything to say about it unless we're writing the check for it. And that's what I'm more concerned about. So that option sets okay with me, quite frankly.
Mr. Lilly.
Speak to a couple things. Number one, the board approved our budget in December, and there's no money in the budget that has been set aside for library purposes, for any reason whatsoever. So, number one, the board needs to do a budget amendment in order to put sufficient funds in the fund to even pay what we're paying, to be correct. Number two, we can all say that we're talked to so-and-so, and we've talked to this person and that point, this person, but none of us individually have the authority to make an agreement unless it comes to the board, and that's what the purpose of this board meeting is, to make those representations and to vote on a method that would be acceptable. We don't all have to agree, but I guess when we're asked for our personal opinions and our township board opinions, they need to be on record. Number three, I should say that when we talk about communication, this communication was not sent to me. It was sent to the accounting department that is responsible to the township clerk. And that's how I received it. So this isn't communication coming from the township that we didn't communicate properly. It's the communication coming continually from the library that they don't communicate properly. So, and the memo speaks for itself, because this was addressed to, the request for payment was made to Dawn in the accounting department, that she, upon receiving that, had forwarded that to me for discussion. I know that we don't have the authority to make decisions for the library. We know that. We've had enough discussions about that. But we're talking about spending township funds, making proper budget amendments and authorizations to do what we're going to do, not simply talk about it. So those are the two things that I want to get accomplished. Number one, we amend the budget to include enough money to make these payments. And number two, whatever the agreement's going to be made, that the board make a motion accordingly that we can go by to make these payments, if you so wish, until the bonds have been received.
What's your time frame, Terry? Are you looking to do that today, or are you proposing that we start working on it?
Mike, we have no budget authorization other than we're taking money out of our, what you want to call our savings or our improvement revolving to make these payments right now. It's not coming out of an approved budget line item. That item needs to be fixed. Number two, the agreement to spend the money needs to be made as an authorization from the board to the clerk's office to authorize the expenditure of those funds. So those are
To
the
clarify,
two items I'm looking
Terry,
for.
you're saying the expenditure of the retroactive or the expenditure moving forward?
Whatever the case may be. I don't think it's right that the library board continues to add to the deficit without this appropriate communication, and I guess my appropriate communication is what I'm bringing to the board tonight, to communicate that the fact that these additional obligations have been added to the township obligation at this point. I'm really a little bit disturbed about when they talk about communication from their side, that this is all communication that we're talking about from the township board.
Whether it's $1 or whether it's $100,000, simple
Make a
fact.
difference. There needs
yeah.
to be authorization and money set aside to do these.
One other thing I just wanted to quickly clarify is Mr. Powell said that it wasn't in their budget, and I did check with the library. They said that this co-director promotion was amended in their budget.
Mr. Fennell, what I would like to do to try to make sure that this is clearer than mud is to sit down with you. You and I can get together as soon as possible and sit down and discuss this matter and try to see if we can come up some sort of terms and agreements that'll be amicable to both sides and acceptable to the township, and therefore we'll have a formal agreement in place, and we'll put some of this question to rest. And I think that will simplify that.
Well, that's fine with me personally, but, you know, we've had this discussion with the township board. I think it would have been a more appropriate discussion to initialize the discussion in front of the library board and get their comments also. So,
Yeah, I don't have a
I-
problem, but again, it's, you're
I don't have a problem
the
either.
treasurer, and I look at you as the financial key holder.
Right.
And you have the best finger on the pulse over there.
I do, but
So-
I don't make decisions for the
I
board.
understand. But you may go back and,
And I will. We have a board meeting tomorrow evening, and I will bring this up.
then
and
I
we'll
would
talk
do
about
so and have some discussion, and then seek me out as soon as you have some information.
Okay.
And we'll sit down and we'll start to hammer something out. And that in turn will have to come back to this board for review, okay?
But a
But it would
plan
be-
for.
But it would be really
what?
nice, excuse me, it would be really nice to put this behind us, okay?
Right.
So that we can move forward.
Yeah. We appreciate, the library board appreciates the support the township has shown us. And, you know, we're very appreciative of that. But, you know, in matters like this, it should be brought to the attention of the library board. I was personally, I think it's disconcerting, confusing, misleading that I see this item, request from library for wage increase, on the township's agenda, and it's kind of, it's misleading. What we're really talking about is the payments in arrears. So I think the agenda item could have been written more clear.
Well, be that-
Because, the library could have been done a courtesy and ahead of time said this item is going to be on the agenda.
Well, be that as it
So,
may.
I know the agenda's put out ahead of time, but
And,
still.
and items are put on the agenda at the request of trustees, as it has been done in the past.
Right, I understand.
So, but be that as it may, let's move forward with this and try to come up with a course of action that everyone will be in agreement with.
Yeah, that's
So-
fine with me. I'll take it to the library board tomorrow.
I'd very much like you to do that.
Okay.
Yes, Ms. Smith?
I apologize, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just want to be clear, are we working towards a plan of repayment? Are we working towards a plan of paying her wage as co-director? Are we setting, you know, I mean, what are we?
I believe the
because-
library should put exactly what their request is together and put it before the board.
Well, I believe Denise did, and then she's willing to set aside her retroactive
I
payment.
understand that, but I would like
Yeah,
to see.
we will
it come-
discuss that
I-
tomorrow.
I respect
I just don't want to
Denise.
mix the two, so are we
Well,
talking
they
about?
They are as one. So what I want the
They
library
should
board to
be.
do is to come up with what their suggestion or what their proposal is, and then we can hash it out.
Okay, all right.
I think that would be the best way to handle this matter.
All right, I will take that to the library board tomorrow.
Directly to the concern that the clerk has, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that our fiscal year ends December 31st, correct?
What's our date, Mr. Treasurer?
Yes, sir.
So we have written checks and taking, and paid for an expense that is not in our budget. And Plant Moran's probably going to be concerned that we have not amended our budget for the ability to do that. So they're not going to have any line item to be able to draw that from. In the past, it's been, we have paid their staff, and then the library pays us back for that.
Correct.
So it's a pass-through
Correct.
deal. Over the past 2, 3, 4 months, whatever it is, we've been fronting that money, and none of that money's been coming back in, and therefore we have an expense that we don't have a revenue source to place against. So before the end of the year, and I don't believe we're planning another meeting before the end of the year, correct?
Not that I know of.
So wouldn't it be wise, and I'm asking the in-house staff because I don't deal with it day to day, wouldn't it be wise for us to give our Plant Moran, our auditing company, the means to be able to deal with those numbers before the end of the year?
I can comment on your concern, Mike. I actually spoke to our partner in charge at Plant Moran months ago about this arrangement, asking if they were concerned about the fact that some of these monies would not be reimbursed until after year end. Their concern was, as I would have expected, the question is, well, do you think you'll get the money back? And I said yes. So they weren't so much concerned about the arrangement as much as they were that we've been fronting money for years and getting reimbursed, and there's never been an agreement in place in writing. That was more so their concern. As far as a budget amendment that might need to be done, that would be out of my arena. That would be a Terry issue.
Talk to Elaine.
Yeah.
Well, if we're gonna do a budget amendment, it'd have to be done tonight, because we won't be.
It's really the same thing with the budget amendment. There's authorization to put money into the fund, and then there's the authorization to spend money out of the fund.
Correct.
So we're really asking to make an agreement, if that's what you're saying, at least to foot the bill of what, and this does not include the December payment, enough money in the fund to supplement, and then again, we'll hold true in 2018. There's no money in the budget to move through 18 or any authorization to pay forward. So I guess that's up to the board. I really prefer the board make a decision of what you want to do, that we move the money, so much money into our budget, and the board wants to vote on a motion to supplement them, then so be it. But there has to be both parts of that in order to comply with the auditor's recommendation. Otherwise, that will be noted in our audit report.
So what does our in-house staff recommend for this issue?
Terry?
I'm only asking the opportunity for the board to put on the table to vote on a method. I'm not saying that I'm in favor or not in favor of it. In fact, I'm not in favor, but irregardless of, the board needs to make that motion, and it needs to make that decision individually.
So the
In
other
order
budget,
to do that, we're going to have numbers, and we don't have all the specific numbers yet. Therefore, this is going to have to wait, and will
I
have to
see.
be a retroactive decision.
okay, yeah, as long as we can do that, because of the budget amendments that we passed tonight, there's a fund we take money out of and fund money that
We
we
have to
put
move
money
from our
into. and-
improvement revolving into our budget.
Right, so, because we don't even have a line item. What line item are we pulling this money out of now?
It'll have to be out of improvement revolving.
Improvement revolving.
We're at the end of our budget year, Mike, so there's not a lot of money in anything excessive to
Yeah.
do that. We could look at that and decide that, but it's gonna take the board authorization. I mean, we can come up with the line item, but the board needs to authorize
We'll have to
that
authorize the
happen.
expenditure and the transfer of the funds.
Okay, so,
But without that amount, I wouldn't go there, I wouldn't venture there, and we'll just have to do it.
so in-house staff is okay with leaving it the way it is and just taking money out of a line item that the board hasn't authorized?
Since, when did this start?
That's what I'm wondering, yeah,
Okay,
that's correct,
so-
yeah.
All those years of the sins of the grandfathers, you're not gonna,
Yeah.
with one swoop of a pen, be able to solve that problem, okay? So it's going to have to be looked at, and a little bit of
Okay.
discussion is gonna have to be done, and then we'll have to figure out the best way to do it.
Yeah, I don't have an answer either,
Okay,
so.
So the treasurer and the clerk don't have the immediate answer.
so if we make the same, if we continue doing what we have in the past so far, it will be the same funds that it has been in the past without any additional in there for promotions, pay raises, or anything, just exactly
I
what it
would
has been in
say
the past.
status quo.
Status quo, okay. Okay.
You're gonna have to come up with a round number, Mike, because it's what I reported tonight, plus whatever that monthly, probably another 80-some thousand, maybe to put in, to have enough money in there to more than cover it, so.
Again,
Well,
that's a Elaine discussion.
could we all feel comfortable to put this on the agenda for next month?
Yeah, I would
don't
think
think
it
it
probably
hurts to
should
have
be
things
addressed,
in
yes.
writing, everybody is clear.
That would be
Everybody
great.
knows what's expected
Joe-
on both sides. We have to keep in mind that this is temporary.
If Joe can follow through with that tomorrow?
Yes,
The only,
so that would,
the only thing we need to keep in mind, it has to comply with accounting principles, not what we believe.
But if it is truly temporary, it's been temporary now for how many years?
Well,
10 years or
Like-
so?
Oh, no.
Are you talking about the payroll process?
The payroll process, so maybe since the library
Talking
is
about the
autonomous,
repayment is
they ought to
temporary.
be autonomous and not run their payroll through the
But
township.
that doesn't solve our problem.
No, it doesn't right now. You're
Let's
right.
take care of our immediate.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I'm good.
And leave it at that. So I would say no action on this item other than coming to a resolve.
No action.
I would say we could postpone this
To next month.
to the next month's meeting. I'd like to make a motion.
I have a question.
Yes, Mr. Reynolds.
So, didn't the library director say that they would front the raise money? You said that, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're worried about $3,000.
So does it need to be on next month's agenda if they're gonna
I mean, her
front
raise should
it?
be processed.
Yeah. Do we need to discuss this again if they're gonna pay it
Well,
on
we
their
still
own?
would like to have an agreement in place.
Well, for sure, an agreement, but I mean, a discussion on possibly making them handle their own payroll is an entirely different discussion that should be had by this board.
For the
You
reason
know,
that you discussed.
logically, we're walking down a flight of stairs that says, okay, we're all tired of this, maybe they should handle their own payroll. And then next time, if there's a problem, it's their problem, it's not our problem, right? So,
That's a
this
little bit
is-
what Mr. Powell has said, and there's been some conversation over that, but right now, that's not addressing the current problem. And that's what I want to do. I want to just get through this current problem. And once we're through this, and once the township is made whole, then we can take a revision as to what further steps would be after that.
okay.
Well, it sounds like for the agenda item, the township board is at this time denying the request. So if you
Well, we're
want
not,
to just,
we're not denying
But the re-
anything, we're not voting, we just don't need it back on. We're not gonna make a decision, we don't need it back on here, right? Because they're gonna handle it now.
But again, the original request was for retroactive payment. That's all it was for.
If you look at, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes, Mr.
If you
Little.
look at the amount of money that's been expended every month, it's right around almost $59,000 consistently every month. So if you want to add another $60,000 to the 315,
Terry can do that.
that could be a round number to possibly get to where we need to be for the end of the year.
I caution you on that. December's a 3 payroll month, 3 paychecks. Both the other months are 2. So if you're just doing round numbers, I wouldn't do the rolling average and do a second pay.
You should just let it lie.
Again, I would really feel much better if we had all the information put together, get all the numbers correct, have an agreement in place, and have discussion on this next month. I would just table this, the entire matter, until next month's meeting.
But there's many matters. Like, her
table it all.
request was for
I would table
retroactive.
anything that would-
That's it. So is her next paycheck going to come out as what? Or we're gonna table her paychecks in general? I just wanna understand.
Anything related to any increase and any change in the status of funds, like status quo of funds. So I make a motion to table. Looking for support.
Support.
I have motion, I have support. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Okay, Mr. Fennell, I look forward to speaking to you very shortly.
okay.
Item 9B, White Lake Township Library Preliminary Site Plan Consideration. Mr. O'Neill.
Hi. Just a second, this projector will start shining this similar image behind you on the wall behind me.
Yeah, sure. Whatever.
Okay, well, while we wait, I will let you know that the request before you tonight is for file number 17-018, which is the White Lake Township Library Preliminary Site Plan. A little history, everyone knows where this is at, but it is on the west side of Elizabeth Lake Road, south of M59, approximately 9 acres in size, zoned agricultural. This matter was first considered by the Planning Commission at their regular meeting of November 2nd, 2017, at which time the special land use that was required and the Planning Enabling Act approvals were both granted, and the preliminary site plan before you tonight was tabled by the Planning Commission due to a required design change, primarily of the driveway, which is, okay, it's on behind me, which is now centered on the property. We preferred, and their original proposal was to have the driveway further south. The road commission determined it could not go there, so that had to be moved. Additionally, the parking lot was shown in the future right-of-way, which could certainly cause problems if the road was to be expanded somewhere down the line. No one can ever predict when that would happen. It could be 100 years from now, it could be never, but it always causes an issue. And so they were asked to also remove their improvements from the future right-of-way line, and they did so. So that caused a little bit of a delay in the process, but they were at the Planning Commission on December 7th, at which time this layout that you have in front of you was proposed, and the Planning Commission recommended approval to the Township Board of the preliminary site plan with some conditions. Those can be found in the minutes of that meeting. And there are certainly numerous comments in this package. I included the minutes of both meetings that I mentioned, as well as the last 2 sets of site plan comments, because some of them got into special land use issues, which were dealt with in November at the Planning Commission, and others got into the revised layout of this plan, which was dealt with by the Planning Commission about 2 weeks ago. So if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them. Mr. Joe Lenning, who is the civil engineer on this project from C2AE, is behind me in the audience and is available to answer any questions that you may have for him as well.
Okay. I know there was some concerns about connectivity, sidewalk.
Yes, as is the case in all new site plans of this kind. There is a requirement to cross-connect both for vehicles and for pedestrians. This plan does not show that. There is an opportunity to do that. That was one of the conditions that the Planning Commission had added to their recommendation for approval, which is that that be shown by the time the final plan gets to them. So there are a couple of different options, or I should say locations, to do just that, to provide a connection from this parking lot to a future road or parking lot further south, as well as a sidewalk connection through there so that there's good pedestrian flow, similar to what you see across the street in the newer developments, so people can get places with their bikes and with their feet rather than behind the wheel of their car. So that was a condition as well. Another thing that's noteworthy that I should mention is the engineering design standards require for certain basin types that they be fenced if there's a certain slope, and without boring everyone with all the details, the Planning Commission made a finding that with the specific design and the specific depth of the 2 basins that are proposed by the library, that the library not be required to put fencing around it. Instead, they were asked to do some landscaping and soften the slope of these what will be dry basins, and not put vinyl coated chain link fence effectively around the 2 basins. And I certainly would support that recommendation. They did have, there was a condition or caveat in the engineering design standards that allowed for that if the Planning Commission or the Township Board made that finding, and so they did. And so that's another issue that came up. They had asked to have a bike rack of some sort, bike rack type feature that was not originally proposed. My understanding is the library's agreed to do so. Again, the exact location and the exact quantity will be discussed at final, and I think the Planning Commission's fine with that. The other issue that's obviously been discussed since August or September is the looping of the water main. Planning Commission wasn't comfortable with, and I recommended that they not really wade into that issue. It's also another engineering design standard item that really, it's up to this board, not up to the planning commission to make that decision. So they really steered clear of that issue. It's an important issue, but really one for you folks to make the decision on in consultation with the water superintendent and the township engineer. So that is an issue I think that is needed to be addressed tonight, an important issue. Everything else I believe is pretty straightforward.
Supervisor,
Mr. Ruggles?
I'd like to make a couple comments. I've reviewed these plans with the planning commission, and I voiced my concern for these detention ponds a couple times, and I was reading through the minutes here. I see Mrs. DeHart was asking about a fence as well, and oh, sorry. Is this better? So I see in the minutes, Debbie there was asking about a fence around these ponds as well, and I think she has a point. 3-4 feet of water, they're actually almost 10 feet down from grade, and it can be dangerous surrounded by children. Planting some bushes I don't think changes that. I did some math on these areas. They're large, and actually in the plans it looks like it's more like 4 smaller areas. They equate to almost 4/10 of an acre, and if you were to put a value on the real estate they eat up, I think it's somewhere almost around $50,000 worth of real estate that they're sitting on. And not that there's anything wrong with it, they're not. This is your plan. That's, if it were mine, I'd have them somewhere else. I do some underground work and get them out of there. I mean, they're eating up. If you look at the plan where they sit on the screen, just behind the building, they're 25 feet higher than grade. Now, if you sent the water down there, gone. I looked at the numbers. You don't have to shake your head. I can see it. It's 940 down there, and it's 969 on here. You can see it later, but I'd send the water out of there, and I'd use that area for something else, swings, anything that would promote children activities, things of that nature. But definitely some kind of protection around that exposed water would be one of my thoughts on that. Secondly, if you want to have a discussion about the looping of the water, I've heard our engineer discuss it a couple times, and you can refresh me and explain it to this board, but from what I've heard, I think it's a no-brainer. It's got to exist. It has to be looped, and that is just an expensive development, and nobody likes those, but they are what they are, and in my opinion, that it's got to be looped. So I would take a second to discuss other options for that water retention or some kind of protection around it.
Are they a pond?
It's like a
Just natural ponds that are already there?
No. This is something that will be. That's right. Yeah. That's right.
Mr.
I
Lilly.
share the concern of the
Just
fence as
one-
well.
I beg your pardon?
I share in the concern of the fence as well, the safety with young children.
Mr. Lilly.
A list that I have for discussion. The retention areas, Sean, I was under the impression that both the retention areas we're talking about 3-4 foot deep. That is that changed from the conversation? Is the one on this side bigger or deeper than that?
That was the information that was conveyed to us by their engineer. They were only going to be approximately 3 feet deep, and they were designed to be dry basins. They were going to be grass. And just for the record, basins by engineering design standard requirements are only required to be fenced if they exceed a certain slope. If they exceed a 1-on-6 slope, then they're supposed to be fenced. If they're a 1-on-4 slope, but they're designed to be a dry basin, which is what what has been conveyed to us, then there is, it is acceptable for a finding to be made that that no longer requires fencing. And Mike may be able to speak more completely to that issue, but as I understand it, it is a dry basin as we had
I was under the
discussed.
impression that they weren't any deeper than 4 foot, and there was no conversation that one may be at
Well,
least 10
it's
foot.
going from the grade of the building at 967 down to 959. So that's more than 4 feet. The other one here next to it is 5 feet deep. But if you go from the property line, 7 feet deep, which is going to be, the top of, balanced grade.
Yeah, keep in mind, there's a difference between the depth of the basin and the amount of water it's gonna hold. And so that's really what the issue is, and I've got some comments on that after you guys get done talking.
I'm sure that depth will vary quite a bit, depending if it rains or not, or whatever, but
Yeah.
there's going to be times when there's plenty of water sitting in there, like today.
You go through a freeze and thaw cycle, that percolation isn't going to happen as much.
I can discuss that.
Okay, that's something we'd like you to touch on. So.
Yeah, my thought is those fences are gonna be an eyesore unless someone tells me that, you need those fences for safety. I'm kind of against the fences.
Does it have to be a chain link, or it can be?
It's the minimum requirement is a 4-foot high vinyl coated chain link fence. That's, I'm sorry, 5 feet. 5 feet. Yeah.
Yeah, they'll vary anywhere, it looks like from 4 feet to 7 feet, depending on which particular contour line that you're looking at. And I'm not sure what the invert is on the overflow on this particular one. Mike, you care to elaborate on this at all?
Yeah, sure, Mr. Supervisor. I don't think the design intent is to have 7 feet of water in that pond, even at maximum 100-year storm elevation. Maybe Joe could speak to that a little more, but I think it's more along the lines of a 3-foot depth.
That's correct.
Probably max. And again, it's a detention basin. It's intended to hold the water for approximately 48 hours and let it drain out. And the intent is to have a grass bottom with mowable side slopes for maintenance. So dry normally, it's going to hold some water when you get a storm event.
Okay, Mr. Powell?
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor, and certainly the health, safety, and welfare of the people that visit this are certainly, and the kids that are going to be in the area, are of concern. The side slope of a 1-on-4 is a relatively flat slope. If you have a walkout basement, the slope from the front of your house to the walkout side is typically a 1-on-3. So for every foot you drop, you go out 3 feet. And that's normally a mowable slope on a riding lawnmower even. So a 1-on-4 is really a fairly gentle slope. You really would not expect kids, unless they deliberately wanted to mudslide down into the water, you don't really slip down a slope like that. And so it's not a major concern, and it is meant to be a temporary system. Do you have another, is this the only drawing that you have, Sean?
This is, no, I've got the whole set that is in your packet.
Okay,
Is there a
go
page
down
you
to
want?
that one right there.
Okay.
I believe when it comes time to do the actual engineering drawings, the outlet for those basins are actually drawn incorrectly. It's got the water coming into those basins from the parking lot by just flowing down a chute down into that first little circle that you see there. It's called a forebay. That allows a lot of the silts to settle out before it outlets into the wetlands to the west. But it's really, it's got a pipe connecting the forebay to the outlet pipe, and that's not the way it works. So our engineering standards don't allow that, and our engineer will have that shown properly. But the intent is that it would only be holding water 3 feet deep. So it's got an overflow. Even though you got some major slopes on there and some deep holes, there's an overflow that won't allow the water to get over a certain depth. And Joe has just said that it's just 3 feet deep, and then it'll overflow, so it really won't exceed that depth and only be there for 24. I'd be shocked if it was there for 48, more like 24 hours. I'm not a fan of fencing either. I believe that I believe they're safe. I believe they'll look a lot better and function better. Fencing holds all the trash bags and everything that flows around, and so it would just be a garbage collector, and would not allow it to be maintained, except for taking the fence down and having a backhoe in and cleaning them all out instead of a nice gentle slope and grass. I might recommend, instead of putting the money into the fencing, we can assure ourselves that it does remain dry, and quite frankly, it takes care of the environment a little bit more if the engineer were to design a perforated storm sewer system, so the water perks away all the way down the pipe that it's carrying the water. It perks into the ground, and then maybe a dry well in the bottom of the detention basin in 4 bay, or a percolation system so that the water does dry up. Even our baseball fields and football fields have an under drain system, so it dries up sooner than just evaporation or transpiration. So that would be a very, very advisable. So in lieu of fencing, I would much prefer to see a dewatering system be put in, instead of looking at that, quite frankly, very ugly fencing, and I hate them. I don't have any problem with that. I think it works well. I was contacted after the last board meeting by a resident on Brendel Lake, and he's very, very concerned about not only this development, but everything that's done around this area, that we do everything we can to clean that stormwater before it outlets into that drain and goes out into Brendel Lake. And a percolation system would go a long way in getting rid of the first flush. When it first starts raining, that carries the oils and the silts and the sands. You get rid of that, and then you have relatively clean water going into the lake instead of all that residue that goes out first. So I have no problem with that. And the Planning Commission did an excellent job, and our consultants did an excellent job. And I'm certainly not in an agreement with changing any of our design construction standards to allow for a deviation from the water system. We require that from every developer that develops in this township, a safe water system, and I think it's important that we have that system looped.
Mr. Potter, you care to comment on the loop?
I agree with the loop.
Or
For water quality purposes, mainly. That's why the standard exists. Age of water, the older the water gets, the more bad things happen to it, especially with our system, not having iron removal in this area. You know, the first problems that we're going to find are the rusty water, the taste, the odor complaints. Corrosion is always a factor when your phosphates start to drop out. And so I would recommend looping the water main.
Mr. Lufkin?
Certainly my November 22nd review letter identified, previous review letters also identified the request for a loop. It's my recommendation that you would loop the water main, which essentially provides 2 connections on the north and south of the property. You're going to get a lot of water movement through those pipes before water is pulled out at the fixtures in the library. With the current design, you've got approximately 1,000 feet of water main that would essentially dead end at the southern limits of the property. Water would sit in that pipe until it's actually pulled out of a fixture. As water sits in the pipe over time, you lose your disinfectant, which can lead to odor problems, taste problems, the rust problems that Mr. Potter identified. So certainly would be my recommendation to acquire a looped water system. I believe the closest connection to the south would be in front of the Wellness Center, which would add approximately 850 feet of water main to the project.
Thank you. Mr. Lilly?
Can I finish my?
Yes, I'm sorry. Somehow we all kind of got slipping around different
I
directions.
just want to make sure my comments are part of the record. The looping of the water line, not an option, it's required. The retention areas, If everybody feels that the slope is appropriate, I'm not going to recommend a fence. Cross easement access, that the easement be brought to the property line, as well as including an agreement for future connection. The trash dumpster location, I have to question that, at least as far as consideration for those, the garbage trucks trying to back out and into that parking area, that every time those trucks back up, whatever, so I'd like the planning commission to look at those possibilities. The fire department turn radiuses need to be adhered to. The road commission requirements need to be met. Snow removal. I guess I'd like the planning commission for final site plan to look at where options of where the snow can be placed rather than on the sidewalks and the landscaping materials. Also, that all of the other comments of the consultant and the planning commission are adhered to. Well, those are just my comments for the record.
Thank you. Any other questions, Ms.?
Not
Look like
so-
you want to say something. So.
Well, not so much a question, but just as I spoke to you earlier today, we tabled an issue 2 months ago of sharing the water main costs for this project. And speaking to you, said that would be part of tonight's discussion. We didn't put it back on the agenda.
Well, I think in its entirety, now that it has reached this level of review and has been looked over by not only the township engineer, but the township water superintendent and the planning commission, I would tend to agree that the loop system does need to be put in place for a matter of public safety and health and well-being for the water quality. So, that's going to be just part of their project. Part of what they're going to have to do. Is it just like when Myers came in and Myers put in almost 2 miles or so of pipe at their expense. Regardless, we as a township are not in a position to necessarily put that along our frontage, because we have a plan that eventually will allow for the private sector to pay for that if it comes into play. So, right now, we're not in the best position to continue forwarding the financial resources that we have already committed to this. So at some point, it's just going to be taken in as part of this project, because when this project was originally conceived, it should have been taken into consideration that was going to be a cost, because at that point in time, township did not own the property to the south. So this is no surprise, okay?
Just following through on the request that was they asked if we could talk about it. They need resolved one way or the other, so.
Oh, yes, go
Thank
ahead.
you. I couldn't hear because.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I couldn't hear myself.
Okay, so I'm not a chemist, but my understanding is without the water loop, there's a health risk to drinking that water. Is that correct?
Potentially.
Okay. Okay. So I guess if there's anything we all learned from Flint, Michigan, and their water disaster, it's to never jeopardize the health of our residents because of money. So I agree the loop needs to be put in. As far as who pays for it, I think we've all seen in White Lake, when you develop and you go first and you go alone, the cost to develop is always more than what you think, especially in regard to water and sewer. And I know this has been stated at previous board meetings. I like the idea of the bike racks. as far as the future cross connections for vehicles and pedestrian cross access, I would want that in there. And then, Mike, I'm not quite sure I understand what I support the idea of no fences, but I'm not sure if you can explain a little more as to what your recommendation is for the drainage of those basins.
Yeah, just for the design engineer to come up with a plan to create a subdrain system that dewaters those basins faster than being proposed right now.
Okay, major cost to do that or no?
No, it can certainly be done much less than the cost of the fencing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'd much rather see that done than have the fencing, because there's a perfect example of how hideous it looks across the street.
Across the street, right.
Through not necessarily any fault of the property owner, but the wind and the weather. And so, okay, thank you.
I'm all set.
Okay. Any other comments from the board?
Just as long as the library satisfied with how we left it 2 months ago, is that you would follow up with them shortly, and there was no there was no communication.
There was no follow. No one ever reached out to me.
So,
Real simple. No one ever approached me about this. My door is wide open. Phone rings 2 ways. There was plenty of time to have conversation. But since then, there's been some discussion as to the length of this pipe, and the water quality issues even brought up more today, and their concerns. And it's just part of the cost of the project. It'll just have to be taken into consideration.
I understand. I just want to make sure that the communication is happening here, because how we left it was you said I would follow up with them shortly, and that conversation hasn't happened, so I just want to make
I've
sure
reached out to the library through Mr. Fennell, through Sean, through different meetings. And Glenn Rosso was told the other night at one of the planning commissions to contact me also. No one's picked up the phone. Okay. The library, the library is in need of something that they have to have done. And it should have been part of their original performa. Again, if we did not purchase a property, let's say today we didn't own that property, you guys would have to figure that out, okay? It's just a course of action that they're going to have to take into consideration as part of this project.
So, do we need to set up a further meeting? Can we facilitate a meeting, or everybody is all set with this issue? Because we tabled it and then we just kind of let it,
I think the motion
fizzle.
tonight will probably address all the concerns that you have and that the library has.
They're the library's concerns. I'm just following through.
The library's concerns, yes. I think that'll probably happen tonight. At least we can address it in the motion.
Mr. Lilly.
I will attempt to make a motion.
Please do.
There was a hand up back in the back. I didn't know if you wanted to open it to the
Oh, I
public
beg your
at all.
pardon. Was there a question?
There was a question. I have a question.
Please stand and identify yourself.
I'm Teresa Johnson, everybody knows me, I live in Sea Powell and White Lake. I have first of all, I didn't know there wasn't going to be public comment about the library, because you said there was public comment for anything that was not on the agenda.
Well, we're
That was on-
talking about it right now.
Well, I was talking about it in reference to what is owed to the township, and I didn't have an opportunity to talk, so I didn't know if I was allowed to. Because I thought it was going to be after.
Yeah. Well, that item right now is inactive, so there's no action's been taken
All
on
right,
that.
my next question is, Liz, what board are you on? Are you on the library board, or are you on this board? Because every time you come in, it seems as though the questions you have aren't related in reference to the township and protecting the township, it's protecting the library. And for someone who's a liaison, these questions that would have been going back and forth should have been done months ago. And when I did approach you and I asked you nicely, why aren't you going back and forth with these boards? Now all of a sudden it's the 12th hour. You want all these questions answered, and
So,
let's help
Teresa-
them with the- excuse me, I'm speaking. And until the loop now has to come in.
Okay, we're just stick to the
My
point.
point is, I'm not sure where you, and we all know where you stand. I'm just not quite sure why you're sitting in that chair.
Okay. Well, the library asked me to follow up on their questions this evening because it was not put back on the agenda. So this is before us to vote, so I want to make sure all issues are addressed before we vote. So they have a question about the water main. If it was, I talked to Rick today, he said this is the time we're gonna discuss it. So this is the time we're discussing it.
Okay, Mr. Lilly.
I'm going to make an honest attempt.
Well,
Uh,
excuse me, I have one more.
Can I make one comment?
Please identify yourself for the record.
Debbie D. Hart, 11178 Sugden Lake Road. I'm very concerned that, I did have a concern about the detention ponds. And I don't like to look at fences, but I was very concerned when the water sat there for 48 hours. A toddler can easily drown in 3 feet of water. So I really appreciate the dry well system. I think that's a fantastic idea. My suggestion was some sort of plantings around the detention areas to soften the look and perhaps stop somebody from toweling down. The comments we got back from the library board was, well, who's going to pay for the plants? I'm very concerned that there's a lot of little things that are going to crop up in the design of this, and fiscally for the entire township, it makes so much more sense to slow down and try to get this done correctly and share costs. And building one building would share costs. And that's what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more? Okay, Mr. Lilly.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the library preliminary site plan, file number 17018, with the following recommendations. Number 1, that the looping of the water line is not an option. It's a requirement to be installed per J&A Johnson Anderson's recommendations. Number 2, that the detention area be placed under consideration with the recommendations that Mr. Paul has indicated in his discussion. That the number 3, that the cross-access easement be built to the lot line, and that it's to include an operation agreement for the property owner to the other side to be connected to at a later date. The trash dumpster location be looked at final site plan approval. The fire department turn radiuses need to be adhered to. The road commission requirements are to be met. Consideration for snow removal, place where to place the snow in the final site plan approval. Also, we will not require any additional fencing at this time, and subject to all the comments from staff, consultants, as well as the discussion this evening at the Planning Commission meeting on December 7th, specifically the water main loop must be installed per the engineer's comments and the township's engineering design standards.
I have a motion, looking for support.
Support for discussion.
Discussion.
I had a couple items, Terry. You didn't mention bike racks. Sean, could that be assumed to be included in the Planning Commission's recommendations?
It was a part of it, so yes, it would be covered.
Okay, it would be foolish to not have a spot for kids to park their bikes. I mean, they're looking for kids to come to the library. So, and then your motion on the easements, Terry. There's a difference between extending the easements to the property line and actually requiring the improvements to be run to the property line as well. So you're looking to have the improvement
to the property line as well as the access agreement.
Okay, thank you.
Is that for both pedestrian and road?
Yeah, pedestrian and road, yes.
Terry, did you make it per the requirements of the Planning Commission as well? Was that in your motion?
Yes.
It was. I had one question to clarify. So we've talked about a system that will either send less water to the basin through the system or drain that water away more rapidly than is currently engineered. Is that going to be a requirement, or are we looking at it? I just want to be clear so I know. If you want to require it
In lieu of
of
fencing.
the fence,
In lieu of fencing.
so you want the water to disappear. I think they're saying it's 48 hours is as long as it would be held. So you're saying you want the water to be. I want to get an exact understanding of what you want to.
My suggestion, anyway, was to put a sub-drain system in the basins to allow the water to dissipate faster and allow the first flush to perk away. I think the design engineer could probably make the basin smaller if he were to design a percolation system, including the perforated pipes that are delivering. Oh, I'm sorry, there are no piping delivering to the basins. So just in the bottom of the
Sub-drain
basins.
system.
Correct.
Okay.
Terry's motion said, required giving consideration to Mr. Powell's recommendations. Is that enough to make this?
I just want to make sure. So you're saying that they must put a sub-drain system to more rapidly remove water from the basin. If that's how I'm taking it.
I would say that. I would agree
In
with
lieu of the
Mike.
fencing, right.
Okay. I just want to make sure I understand where you're going, and that's.
And our
that's-
township engineer knows exactly what I'm talking about.
And their design engineer's here to hear it as
Yes,
well,
yes.
so that's, I think we're covered, so.
You good? The motion's good this way?
I understand it,
I
yes.
just want to know if their engineer has any issues with that.
I think that's something that I and the township engineer need to discuss further.
Okay, not so much, I wasn't talking money, but as far as mechanics, is it doable?
Yeah, let's do it.
Sure.
Okay.
Let's do it. I've done it before.
So, Denise, you were wanting to make a
We
comment.
have a motion support on it.
Okay, well,
I have a question about the improvement to the lot line. Part of that is a construction easement. So if there's construction that goes through there, that's gonna wreck that
So what,
improvement.
they would have, whomever would do the construction would have to replace whatever was done. That's how it's
See
done.
that we could draw it as a future, not actually have to do it today.
No.
that is actually not accurate. It was to be built as part of the plan, and it was made abundantly clear at the time of the meeting that is the way it's done, that is the way I recommend it, and I would say it would be short-sighted to do it any other way than to build as a part of this plan all the
And
improvements.
that
to the
goes
lot
back
line.
into your comments of the planning.
Exactly.
Shot all the way to the lot line?
That's exactly right.
Does.
So what I'm talking about, and this is not work, oh, I guess it is, I'm talking about some point, like we talked about at the planning commission, for vehicle, and this, again, isn't moving, for vehicles and pedestrians to make it from your parking lot to the south, wherever that may be. It was discussed, it could be here. I suggested possibly here. There was preference, I think, from the library side of the discussion to move it down here. It really doesn't matter. We didn't specify exactly where it had to be. It just had to be, and it had to be built.
All right, thank you.
Uh-huh.
We have a motion, we had support. All in favor?
Can I have a roll call vote, please?
We can do a roll call vote.
Liz Smith,
Yes.
Andrea,
Yes.
Mr. Powell,
Yes.
Mr. Ruggles,
Yes.
Mr. Early votes yes. Mr. Roman,
Yes.
Mr. Colwell.
Yes. We have approval of preliminary site plan as noted.
Excellent.
Request, item 9C, request for a contract renewal from HydroCorp Cross Connection Backflow Prevention. Mr. Potter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Supervisor. The Water Department is asking the Township Board to approve a renewal of our contract with HydroCorp for commercial inspection of cross-connection and backflow prevention devices.
Very good. You care to elaborate that to the public a little bit so they understand the importance of this?
Sure, so what this is a contract with a commercial inspector that specializes in backflow prevention to make sure that water that's delivered into some of our larger commercial buildings stays in that building and doesn't then backflow back into the township system. These are complex systems. We're talking about places like Myers or the new Kroger, large complex water systems. They have, several different processes in there, boiler heating, all kinds of different internal processes. We don't want that water to go in there through whatever processes they use on site and then come back out into our system. for
Possible
any reason.
contamination.
Correct. So, because it's commercial and they're very complex, we hire these experts. This contract would be a renewal of their previous 3-year contract. Unit pricing is exactly the same. It covers up to 36 inspections over a 3-year period, monthly amount of $155, annual amount of $1,860, contract total, base contract total of $5,580. We've had very good success with HydroCorp. They're the leading experts in the industry, and we're very happy with the work that they've done with us so far.
Mr. Lilly.
I'd like to make a motion to approve a 3-year professional service agreement with HydroCorp, and authorize the township supervisor to sign the contract.
A motion, looking for support? Support. Motion, support, all in favor? Aye. Ayes have it. 9D, request from Dublin Senior Center for a massage license. That always sounds funny when you.
No, it's not a massage license. Come on, that's not what they're asking for, right?
Rub down.
Hey.
Wait a minute here, this is a family show.
Yep. Hey.
Essentially, it's just the renewal of the license.
It's a renewal of a license. She has met all of the township requirements for licensing. The request is to waive the fee, as she is providing, even though she does get paid for her services, that the township does get a benefit from her being convenient to our seniors, as well as her setup fees, and those type of fees are not included in her amount. So. And we've done this for a number of years.
Understood. Any questions or comments? Is it Swedish or Japanese?
Don't do that.
Okay, I just thought you'd want to know. You're over there with that question, okay?
I'll make a motion to approve item number 9D.
We have a motion, looking for support?
Support.
Motion, support, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, ayes have it. 9E, transfer of liquor license. Yes, request 9E. You know, I had the same problem a little earlier. I couldn't find something else.
Okay.
So, at 9E's request to transfer a Class C liquor license to Lafayette Market and Oakland County, it should be from, I believe, Oakland County Parks and Rec, I believe.
No, they're going to be
I
collaborative.
beg your pardon, what's that?
The applicant is here.
The applicant is here too? This is good, okay. Mr. Lee, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, Mr. Supervisor, this is a request for the White Lake Oaks Golf Course to change applicants for their setup in the kitchen and their liquor license obligations to White Lake Oaks. This has nothing to do with an addition or whatever the name of the company may indicate. This is strictly liquor license approval for White Lake Oaks.
Very good.
Anybody want to hear from the applicant tonight?
Yeah, it's to approve the co-application with White Lake Oaks and the market,
Right.
Lafayette Market.
Yes.
Oh, I see it, yes, okay. Hi, welcome. Please do.
She went the long way, Greg.
I'm Linda Mayer from Agassiz, Allen, and Rentrop, here tonight representing Oakland County Parks and Recreation with Kyle Westberg of Lafayette Market. So what it is, it's a little bit confusing the way it's worded simply because of the way the Liquor Commission addresses these applications. It's an application to drop the current food and service beverage provider whose contract will terminate at the end of the year and just add the new food and beverage service provider, which is Lafayette Market. Still Oakland County Parks and Recreation, still same plan of operation, just a new provider. Kyle's here to answer any questions you guys might have operationally.
I am familiar with who he is, and I know his operations and what he's doing to Pontiac and aiding in that resurrection of that town. I commend you on that.
Absolutely.
And if your food and service is half as good as what's over there, this will be a pleasant change.
It's 10 times better than what's over
Yes,
there.
it will be. We might actually book some things over there now.
There you go. Love you. Love to have you.
Any questions from the board members?
I've just got a couple.
Yes, Mr. Lilly.
When you move into the facility or when you take charge of that, I know the fire marshal has indicated a number of items in regards to cleaning of the kitchen hood and the vent system. Is that something that's already been done, or?
My understanding is that everything has been done except for the test, the pressure test or the fire suppression test, which is scheduled for as soon as they could schedule. I think it's January 2nd. So
Could you just check with John Holland, our fire marshal, when
Absolutely.
you take possession over there, just to make sure everything has been completed?
Absolutely. The county is all over that.
Okay, very good, okay. Any council, any questions, anything? No, very good, Brad, okay. Short and sweet, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Good to see you, Linda.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Looking for a motion to approve?
There's someone with a question.
I beg your pardon?
There's somebody with a question.
Oh, someone, I beg your pardon.
That's okay. I had a question actually back to 8A, if you want to approve that. I just had a question.
Well, let's get through this
Can you approve
here.
that? Yeah, thank you.
So, okay, where were we? Okay, Mr. Lilly, go right ahead.
I'll make a motion to approve the liquor license transfer for Lafayette Market LLC and the Oakland County Parks and Recreation Commission for the White Lake Oaks Golf Course facilities.
We have a motion, looking for support.
Support.
We have support from Andy Voorhees. Motion and support, all in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Thank you very much. Welcome to the neighborhood. Okay. I beg your pardon, you had a question? Could you identify yourself?
Oh, sure. April Pachmar, 9857 Elizabeth Lake Road. In the resolution A, you were talking about the poverty guidelines and then stated that you wanted to approve some tax relief. What are the guidelines on tax relief? How is that? Can you explain that a little bit? I'm kinda confused.
We could not address that. We would not be the authority to address that. That would strictly be something at state level.
And there's another board that uses these guidelines, right?
Yeah.
Well, no, but I mean, how does it apply to the township then? How do you?
We recognize it, okay? And then the assessor would apply whatever means she has necessary to enter any relief for anyone. And that would be a question to the assessor.
Right.
And so when I get my property taxes, you're suggesting to them maybe to do some relief? Is it across the board, or is it for?
It's strictly to meet the financial criteria of those limitations. And that would be a discussion that would have to be done with the assessor.
Okay.
So she would be, and I'm sure she'd be happy to address anything you want to know on that. Because I'm not that familiar with it. I couldn't give you the right answer. But I do know it does enact some relief.
What is,
Janine?
In order for them to get relief of their property taxes, there are certain requirements, according to this, that have to be met in order for
There's a
the board to
process.
consider the reduction.
There's a process. All right, moving right along. Old business to 10A, second reading of the fee ordinance amendments, ordinance 129. Counselor, any comment on this?
This was an ordinance that was prepared by the clerk's office after sending emails to all department heads about any requested changes. You considered it last month for first reading. This is the second reading, which is the point in which you adopt the ordinance.
This is our adoption, correct, okay. Any questions from the board?
I spoke on this last time, and I was against raising the fees for the cemeteries. We just did this a couple years ago, and I still feel the same.
Okay. So duly noted. Mr. Powell?
I think it was being raised because our costs are being raised in order to do this, so we would have to take it out of general tax dollars if we didn't match the increase that our contractor has required.
Understood. And at the time, I didn't think he should get a raise.
Oh.
I still feel that way.
I'm not sure he does. Okay. Okay. Okay, very good. So we have looking for motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the changes to the fee ordinance.
Approve the second reading of the fee ordinance amendments to ordinance 129. Looking for support.
Support.
Motion and support. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Item 10B, status of Civic Center Consulting Project. Mr. O'Neill.
I don't have a whole lot to report. They were a little behind schedule in getting it to us. Actually, last Friday, I received a draft that they asked me to go through before they finalize it. I haven't had an opportunity to get through it yet. My hope is that this will be something that when we get comments back, then they'll have it in final form for us to do what we wish with it after the first of the year.
Also, it's a compilation of all that information and some recommendations to the township, to give us some direction as to where to go.
Basically, and if, and I think it would make sense at some point over the course of the winter to possibly set up a meeting, joint meeting of the Planning Commission and Township Board to talk about it.
That would be a great thing to do.
I think the scope of this project went beyond, I will say, what I anticipated initially, and went into more detail than I had expected, and I think it will be a useful tool for us, almost a sub-area plan for us to kind of use to guide future growth in that area in a way and in a manner that not only we feel strongly about, but the couple hundred people who participated in the process felt strongly about, and so that's a good thing.
Well, it's obvious that the county's taken note of that particular area because they went and put 3 stop signs up over there.
They did, and I think that's one intersection that may need further attention. I mean, there are a few in the township, but these are conversations that will be ongoing with us here locally and other agencies that are involved when we grow and as our infrastructure expands. They would be pulled into those discussions as well, and this plan would be kind of us putting our best foot forward and saying this is where we see our community going in this area, and we're going to want to know as soon as possible what obstacles we may have to overcome, or what what requirements they may have for us initially, so we can begin to plan for those as we start to implement a plan for that area.
Okay, very good. Any other questions? Mr. Powell?
More of a statement. This is not unlike what we did. It's not unlike the Planning Commission taking on a micro area analysis to be able to determine the validity of the master plan and rezonings in an area. So this is going to be invaluable. I personally have been contacted by 2 developers who are using that as a guideline and as a means to potentially purchase and develop per those guidelines, and are very interested in public-private partnerships for just exactly this. And so I think it's going to be extremely valuable to this township for many, many years.
When we did our last master plan update, it was pretty robust, and it went into specific studies on areas, and this was one area that we called Town Center.
Yeah.
And so this does an even deeper dive into that area, and so I think that's exactly what you said. It's more of a sub area, really drilling down on specific topics and issues in that area beyond just, I guess, a macro look at land use going forward. And so and I think the fact that the township and the library are investing in their future in that area sends a pretty strong message to the development community. And I think that from what I've heard as well is that if all of those uses are going to be collected in that area, those folks want to be there too. It's a destination, and so I think that we are just kind of beginning to develop this area, and we're going to see the momentum grow as time goes on, and it's exciting.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, are you all set with that?
I could talk until I put everybody asleep.
Okay, very good.
You don't say.
And I usually do.
Okay, moving right along, we're going to go to trustee comments, and I'm going to start out with Ms. Voorhees.
First, I want to publicly thank Chief Keller for talking to my Boy Scouts at last month's meeting. They're 42. Their goal is to talk to some of the township leadership, and Mike Powell, Mike Rumlin were there also, but we are the chopped liver compared to you. Yeah, they were done with us momentarily. Yes. They were all about you, your equipment, and the other gentlemen that were there for the police department. We had a very successful Santa at the Fisk Farm weekend. I made it there in the last hour. I want to thank Liz and her committee for the tree lighting that happened the same weekend. It was great weather. And also that same weekend, Rick had encouraged, or Supervisor Koval, sorry, had encouraged myself and my husband to be part of the Holiday Extravaganza Parade in downtown Pontiac, which represents White Lake, Waterford, Pontiac, and Auburn Hills. It's a very cool parade. It's growing every year. I saw some White Lakers there. It was very cool. White Lake as a community needs to embrace it. We also give a scholarship as part of that to a local White Laker that I think she's going to be coming before the board. So it was very fun. And my last comment is to wish everyone a safe and happy holiday season.
Very good.
Was there a lot of people at the parade?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's
I mean,
amazing.
It wasn't,
Yeah?
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. So
Yeah.
it was interesting.
I'd never even heard of it.
it was absolutely.
Neither did we. So, until we got involved. Ms. Smith.
Okay. First I want to apologize to my colleagues and residents for being a few minutes late this evening. I'm so sorry about that. So as Andrea mentioned, we started off the month with a fantastic tree lighting event. The weather couldn't have been better, and I believe it turned out to be our largest one yet. And I want to thank the committee and the sponsors that made it possible, and the volunteers that helped us set up that night and tear down the fire department. It was wonderful. They help us when we're cold and tired at the end of the night, and we couldn't do it without them. And I also want to give a special thanks to Greg Broney for helping me on this event, and he was a pleasure to work with. And I hope everyone enjoyed it. If you haven't made it, I know most of the board, I think everyone was there, right? So it was a great event, and looking forward already to next year, already planning some new and exciting things for next year. I attended Alta's grand opening, and it was wonderful. I'm sorry that my colleagues missed it, but I did want to share with you an interesting fact. They told me that their opening numbers were the highest in the nation right here in White Lake. So I thought that was pretty exciting for little old White Lake. Also, I attended the water filtration opening. And great job, Erin. Congratulations. You're well-deserved. It's fantastic. If anyone would like to give a tour, I'm sure Erin would like to show off his work.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was great. Also, I want to thank everyone who participated in the Shop with the Cop this year. That's a great program. And they were at Walmart and Myers as well. And how many kids do you know offhand? 65 kids. That's wonderful. Also, I want to thank the Senior Center for hosting Rick, myself, Mike Roman, and Terry for a lovely luncheon today. That was great. And I want to mention that as the library board meeting is tomorrow, just their regular monthly meeting at 6:45 in the lower level as usual. I would like to clarify something. As the library communication liaison, my job is a little bit different as my fellow colleagues. Some of them are liaisons to zoning, planning, and parks and rec. I am not a voting member of the library board, as they are voting members of their prospective liaison positions. I'm not a paid member. I volunteer 100% of my time as a library liaison, and I do the best I can to facilitate communication. Communication has improved. There is communication behind the scenes. I've talked to just Mike Roman again today, and there is a plan in place. We are moving forward. As a community, we need to heal from last month's board meeting, and we need to move forward, and there is a plan to move forward, and we do need to focus on working together. And I just hope everybody gets on board with that, and I encourage you all to look to the future and working together as a community. but I did just want to clarify that my position as a library liaison is different. So don't always shoot the messenger. My job is to bring up their concerns so these boards can potentially work together in a positive manner. So, you know, they do ask me to bring things forward to this board and vice versa. This board asks me questions to go the other way, and they are communicating and it is improving. I'm hopeful that it will continue to improve. So lastly, I just want to wish everybody a very safe and Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays and a Happy New Year as well. Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Ruggles.
Yeah.
Bless you.
Rick, can you remind me, what's the acronym that stands for that program that we run, that we approve, that
CBDG?
That's it, CBDG. So, Merry Christmas.
Don't ask me to say that again quickly.
Yeah, and I always mix it up, but it's the time of year that that kind of stuff becomes really important. So all the people that are in need, if you can think of any, refer them to the supervisor's office. We can assist in small house repairs if they meet the poverty guidelines that we mentioned. And it's usually this time of year that Greg Baroni would give me a call and see if he could solicit a Christmas tree to give out. So tomorrow, I've got a whole bunch of Christmas trees over there. I'm going to bring them. I'm going to give them to Rick, and he can see to it that they get handed out to whoever you see fit.
Cool.
Yeah, so I've got
Kind of like the pumpkins.
some great ones over there. Yeah, I did the same thing at Thanksgiving, and I don't donate to say that I donated. I do it just because I want to, so I don't mention it. But we dropped off like 150 pumpkins to give to, I hoped, very needy children, because the last thing I wanted was them to go to kids that already could buy their own pumpkins. I want them to go to the kids that can't have their own pumpkins. So same thing with the tree. Hopefully you can find some families with little kids that need a tree, so.
The kids appreciated the pumpkins as well as the trees this year.
Yeah.
So I'll bring them over, and you can do what you want.
I'd like to thank you for all that you do for the town.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, no problem. So, Merry Christmas.
Very good. Mr. Ron.
I get to go next? First of all, I wanted to say thanks to all of the township employees over the years. We've had a Jeans Day on Friday. We put $1 into a jar, and we've attributed over $1,000, and just in conjunction with the Huron Valley Optimist Club, and I'd like to thank them. They are taking that money in the form of food cards and distributing those cards to needy White Lake families. So great job, township employees, and thanks to the Optimist Club. And finally, I just want to thank everyone for attending tonight's board meeting. Happy holidays to everyone. Carol Burkhart, happy holidays to you. Happy New Year to you.
Very good. Mr. Lilly.
Well, first of all, I'd like to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And just let the rest of our board members know that I appreciate, and even though that sometimes we have some differences of opinion, whatever, that I think all those opinions together really make some good decisions that this board has made in the past and will in the future. So I want to thank you for that. So.
Mr. Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I noticed that you made copies of a correspondence that we received from Leroy and Levita Powers, and I wanted to thank you for that. And I wondered if you might consider adding correspondence to one of the first few items there. If you could provide us with correspondence, and then we can just approve to file and accept and file it, or something.
Actually, Terry received that.
Okay, it would be great if we knew how the residents how they were corresponding with us. That would be awesome.
When we get them, we try to do that.
I received this in my mailbox.
I did too.
Oh, okay.
But I'm sure there's mail that comes in much more than just this.
I can't let you read some of it.
Oh, well, okay, that's why.
It's not good. No.
And I agree with Liz. The senior luncheon today was very, very good, and my scale's going to prove it tomorrow. Mm-hmm. It was great food, and I ate
Dessert was good.
more than my share of it. Yeah, that's exactly correct. I also wanted to ask this board to, maybe the administration, we have received a number of concerns regarding sanitary sewers on Lakeview and the end of Farnsworth, south of Hutchins. And that area is in terrible, desperate need of sanitary sewers, and they just can't get their act together to sign a petition. And I'm gonna request maybe a meeting with the supervisor, maybe the township engineer, and Aaron, the DPW, and hopefully myself, and see if we can't come up with a conceptual plan and maybe initiate a special assessment district by this board instead of waiting for them to be able to send out petitions. Maybe we initiate one in there just for the public health, safety, and welfare. Those lots are so small, and we get calls for designing engineered septic systems back in there, and they are, no matter what you do, they're inadequate. Those homes are on such small parcels. They're putting $30,000 to $40,000 into septic fields that are going to fail again in 10 years when we could put that money into a sewer system.
The only problem is that it never seems to be all at the same time.
That's the problem. So if we could initiate maybe at least a public hearing for the establishment of an SAD in that area and get some comments from those people, and see if, even if we extend it out 20 years, and don't make it a mandatory hookup, but extend it out 20 years, make it a very reasonable cost to get sewers in the ground so that when their sewers, where their septics fail, they have a place to go other than just wasting their money. Besides that, I wish all my residents and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Thank you all very much for being township residents and caring about this community. So thank you very much.
Very good.
The septic, does that feed into Cedar Island then, over there?
Unfortunately, when you are within 300, 400, 500 feet of a lake, there's only one place that septic water goes. It goes into the lakes. And
So did you get help from the state then, since it's a state?
you could if it was declared an emergency. We don't want to have anything declared an emergency. And as Mr. Supervisor pointed out, it happens one septic field at a time, even though, quite frankly, I'll bet you half or 3/4 of the septic systems are failing in that area. We don't want to cause a big uproar about it, but it'd be great to have an option to septic fields in that area.
It'd be nice to be able to be of assistance, because our intention is to try to, keep our waters as clean as possible, and we know the need for it. However, we cannot force people to join in, and if the numbers, we did have a cursory study done in a certain area over there, and once the engineering costs came back, everybody abandoned it. So it was a problem. Are you done?
I am. Thank you, sir.
All right, very good. First of all, I'd like to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And politically correct or not, I'm still going to say that. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And I said that on that sleigh all the way through the parade, which was a good time. I would really like to thank our one of our maintenance guys here, our building maintenance guy, John Wheaton. He was something else. He actually pulled a float. We pulled the DTE
Yes,
energy float, and we had the RIF girl on it, and we didn't know we had the WRAF girl on it at the time. And I guess we've got pictures on the RIF's website of John and the whole gang and everything else. And he really came back with a different look at it after looking at these kids and seeing the people that really enjoy it. And it's another, may take us to another level of participation, because people need to know that we're here and that we support these communities, because the health of our communities that are around us is as important to us. Our neighbor catches a cold, we're subject to it. So we've got to try to be aware of these things and see what we can do to support our communities that surround us, and that's a good thing. I'd also like to thank Doug Utter, our building maintenance, internal maintenance gentleman. All of these beautiful decorations, Doug came in on his own time and decorated this hall in its entirety. And if you were to come in here and take a look around the hall, it truly is a little winter wonderland. And I will tell you, it is a very seasonally joyous place to be in this environment.
Doug's awesome.
Yep.
Yes.
Doug's a great guy, a good big help. Greg, Mr. Barone. I will tell you that your dedication to the tree lighting affair, you should get the silver tree award because I had to chase you out of there. My wife had to chase you out of there and get you to eat and everything else. And I know you were running around like a chicken with your head cut off, but it all came together, and we were able to use some of the workers that we were able to get from the probation department. It was very helpful, and that worked out real well. And Aaron, again, Village Acres, kudos to you. I know that it's working because I have had people, and Aaron's heard this story, but I had someone at one of the groups I was speaking with, they said, well, you know, we know there's a change because we called up the water softener company, had them come out and check out our water softener because it didn't seem like it was using the salt it normally uses. And I said, well, that's a good thing. And they told them that the water quality is better, so that's a plus. We would like to, at some point in time, in the future, be able to bring our Village Acres, not Village Acres, I'm sorry, the Aspen Meadows plant online also with this type of facility. And that would pretty much really give us an excellent water quality and give us a major reduction in our iron throughout the entire township water system at that point in time. And that would be the ultimate goal of the township. There's a few things we've got to do to get there, though. So, and next, I'd like to thank my my exec, Trish Pergament, and Kelly Lang. Kelly's my part-time, Trish is my full-time. Trish kind of came in under turbulent waters and has done an absolutely phenomenal job. And a phenomenal job with the CBDG and trying to get things where they need to go and be very, very specific and organized. And she's a breath of fresh air, and I really enjoy working with her. So to all of you, I say, have a wonderful Christmas season. Be safe, be careful, enjoy, don't drink too much, don't eat too much, although you will. And God bless everyone here in White Lake Township. And with that, we're going to go to an FYI. Mr. O'Neill?
Just quickly, you've got a brief memo that addresses the direction that this board gave the Planning Commission and myself earlier this year, which was to look at the zoning ordinance, in particular the home occupation section of the zoning ordinance. We spent a couple of months studying it and looking at other communities' ordinances, and after significant discussion determined that it was in the best interest of the township to leave our ordinance as it stands. That was their position at this time, so I just wanted to bring that information back to you. It was ready last month, but I was not here that last month, so I wanted to let you know before the end of this year that it is wrapped up, and that's where the recommendation lies. So
The question is, when you were in the woods, were you successful?
I was.
Okay, good.
I was.
Very good.
Which doesn't happen all that often.
Yes, very good.
Let's make a motion to adjourn.
Motion looking for support.
I'll support that.
Motion and support. All in favor?
Aye.
Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, Carol.